You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And we are back with another Pride and Prejudice episode, which is my favorite subject of all time, maybe. I mean, I do love Sanditon very much, but Pride and Prejudice, it's been my love since I was in like 7th grade. So we are discussing the 1995 version today and realized this week that there's, I don't know how all these years I thought it was only 5 hours and 5 episodes. There's 6 episodes, 6 hours of this show. Sorry about that if you guys were expecting to get it done in 5 hours and you trusted me implicitly.
The 1980 version is only 5 episodes.
Is it? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. No, I can't because I don't think I've ever seen the 1980 version.
Oh, well, it's available. I think it's on BritBox.
And this one, I actually didn't watch until I was in college. I was like in my 20s when I saw this one for the first time. And I don't know how I missed it all these years. Because I do. Now, the 2005 version is my favorite. But I love this version. It's just 2005 I like better. Yeah.
It's much tighter. But are we doing the comparison now?
No. I just want to, because I always feel like if I say that I love something or I prefer something, they're going to think, oh, you don't like the other one then, but that's not true. I love this version.
Yeah. When in watching this one, and of course they right away talk about Andrew Davies being the behind
scriptwriter.
Yeah, the scriptwriter. He also did a series on Sense and Sensibility, which I hadn't realized. It's not my favorite one, but I don't know. I haven't watched his version, so I'm going to have to watch his version. But it's just amazing to me that he did that one. I forget what year. I'd have to look it up, but it was probably 10 years before he did this one.
Oh,
so
really?
It must have been,
85 then?
1985-ish. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. So interesting, huh?
I'm looking that up. He's done a lot of Jane Austen stuff. That's why it didn't surprise me at all when I saw that he was involved in Sanditon, because my first thought was, who else would you get to write Sanditon other than the one who's consistently written Jane Austen pieces
and had a claim for them? And also, I think what's that?
What do you mean he had a claim for them?
He had gotten awards for his.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Had a claim, received a claim, whatever the right term is.
And of course, he also did Bridget Jones's Diary, which Colin first starred in as Will Darcy.
But that was later, right?
It was, but he still used Colin Firth as Darcy in Bridget Jones's Diary.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if he did the casting, but I'm sure he had some influence over it. Yeah, he certainly looks much younger. But it's funny to me there's only 10 years between this version and the 2005 version, because this one feels much older.
It does. Now, Andrew Davies is credited as writing the Sense and Sensibility miniseries from 2008.
Oh, you're right. I have that backwards. He did Sense and Sensibility later.
10 years later than.
Right. And the other version, the one that I've seen and like, is from 97, 6, something like that. Anyway.
1995 is the movie version. Because we were looking that up on the live the other day, and we found that all the best versions that we all like, except for, I like the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, are all 1995. Like there's like 7 different, I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of Jane Austen adaptations that came out in 1995.
Which is funny to think about.
Yeah.
Why was it so popular then?
And I think
on waves.
With this one, I always feel kind of bad because like when I'm talking about the 2005 version, I get like, oh, it's all about the passion. They're better at the passion, blah, blah, blah. And I forget when I turn this on that it sounds like I'm saying that they aren't really exhibiting emotion, but Jennifer L., I think she's a great Elizabeth Bennet. I really do. But I think it's the way when you're adapting from book to screen, there's a way that they deliver their lines in the 1995 version that's just a little more stiff. Their facial expressions don't always line up with the tone of their voice. And I think that was one of my things that I had an issue with in this one.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty hard to talk about this and not do a comparison to the other one.
We did it with the other one. We can do it. I have faith in us.
Okay. Well, let's get started. Not comparing it.
Well, no, I was just saying that's one of the things I noticed about this one is that when I say that this one lacks passion, that's all I mean. It's not that, because in the opening scene in the first episode, Jennifer L does a great job depicting emotion. And I sometimes forget that because it doesn't compute in my head all the time because the facial expressions don't line up with the tone of voice all the time.
Right. It's much more reserved. It's probably much more English.
Yes, that's what I kept thinking too.
Traditional English, much more, I have my emotions under control. At least that's the stereotype. How true it is, I really don't know.
And this version is, like we talked about, like it's 6 hours. You could basically read the book to this version. It's very detailed to the book. It sticks right to the script that Jane Austen wrote, essentially. Obviously, there's some things that they've altered to bring it to screen. There's some things that they've removed to bring it to screen. But overall, through and through, it's basically the book on screen. Yeah. Which there's no way I can not love something that is that, because the book is what I fell in love with first. I just, in my head, when I'm reading the book and I'm reading these lines that Elizabeth is delivering or Darcy is delivering, there's more yelling, there's more passion, there's more. And I'm not in English society, and I know that that's the tendency, is to be more reserved. You watch any English especially from that time in the 90s, any English sitcom other than Ab Fab was very reserved. I don't know if you remember Ab Fab, but that was one of my favorite shows when I was in high school.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, I didn't watch it a lot, but
loved it.
It was
loud.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely in that same vein. And that's the approach. And I don't feel like you really get, in my opinion, much passion until the fifth episode. Then I really think the most passion I saw in this was when when Elizabeth went to Pemberley, though that set of scenes, I guess maybe it's episodes 4 and 5, but anyway, even I don't think episode 6 was all that passionate, but it's definitely more like keeping exactly to the book as opposed to interpreting it the way you see with other films and books, and it's definitely that.
And they acted out Jane Austen's descriptions. That's true. They did, like, she put those, her book is not all dialogue, obviously, so they put those things in there. But the problem with doing it exactly as it's written is that it comes off stiff in some parts. And there are some parts that it wasn't like that. Like the second time Darcy and Bingley come over to the Bennet's house in the end in episode 6, and they're walking, I do appreciate that they had that speech in there, because it's more her saying, because she actually says the words, my feelings are so opposite to what they were then. And I think we need to hear that. I think that we need that aspect. But I like how they did that scene, because she's almost shy about saying it because she's ashamed. So they do. And she even says what Jane Austen wrote of, I'm ashamed of what I said back then. I can't think of it without shame. So there is that, but she actually, that's the one point that I think they do well when there is any sort of shame, or I don't know what that says about English culture, but they're really good at acting and depicting out those parts where they feel shame of what they've done or said. And even Darcy, Colin Firth, he has a little bit of a smirk on his face while he's saying some of these things. And I appreciated seeing that, because I think that's the first time that we see that in him throughout the movie. Every time he's talking with Elizabeth Bennet, we're supposed to see him softened and vulnerable. At least that's how I always read the book. But when he comes across her in Pemberley, he's still very rigid in his speech. And I want to see a loosening of that.
Right. And at first, the first few episodes, he just stares at her, and it's creepy the way they depict it. I mean, it's not like I'm mesmerized by you. It's just pretty darn creepy.
Yep. It says, I have plans for you, but not in a good way.
Well, and it's, and she challenges him even on it, and it's still creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way they depicted that, and I don't remember it being that way in the book, but
Jane Austen just mentions in the book that he watches her, and it's Charlotte who points it out, that he watches you wherever you go.
Right, yeah, but I don't know that. I mean, I think they had too much time, so they showed too much of him staring at her.
Yes, they did. And the other thing they did, though, that I appreciated was when she gets his letter and he's saying he's laying down all the reasons why he pulled Charles Bingley away. They flash back to the scenes he's referencing.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, because I had a friend of mine in college who we all watched this together. And it was my friend who had seen this several times, me who hadn't seen it before, but had read Pride and Prejudice, saw the other Pride and Prejudice. And then a friend who didn't know anything about this world. And she kept asking questions. And when we watched the 2005 version, we were trying to like bring her memory back there. And she's like, I don't get where they showed that. But then in this version, they went back to the
show you what they already showed you.
Yeah, they went back to the scene in the ballroom when the dad interrupted Mary. And this Mary, she is way less likable. Like, I feel like the Mary in the book is not so, like, she's proud of her religiosity. She's proud of her piousness, but she's not mean. And I feel like this Mary is kind of mean.
Especially with what happened to her sister.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she voices that. And the other character that I really didn't like, I mean, the other thing that happened when you see 6 episodes of Mrs. Bennet, it's like way too much.
Yes.
She is, I mean, I don't remember hating her quite so much before, but really, really dislike her in this version.
And that's like, when I actually saw that woman and I don't remember what else I saw her in, but her voice wasn't that shrill. I was like, oh, look at that. I can watch you on screen now. That is hard to watch you with that other one.
I know. I kept turning the volume down when she was doing her little tirades.
It's so shrill. And I like to believe, and maybe this is just my own supposition, but I like to believe that Mr. Bennet wouldn't marry someone that's that wholly awful. This Mrs. Bennet is awful. She's supposed, I envision her as silly, as nonsensical, as only focused on getting her kids married, but she's also like mean to her other girls. And I don't remember, maybe I need to read it again, but I don't remember her being mean to her other daughters. I remember her having favorites, but.
Right. She's beyond silly. And you don't get I mean, I don't think the depiction is that they really love each other
at all.
How did they have 5 children? And so you just wonder what happened from the speech he gives about how he regrets not saving money for his daughters and basically having money for them when they were ready to get married, that he always thought he'd have a son that would inherit. And you just wonder if after 5 girls, whatever love there was at the beginning was a little lost.
Well, he does say to Elizabeth in that speech, because she says, do you have any other objection other than you think I don't want him? And he said, well, no, we don't want to be unpleasant, whatever. But I would hate for you to grow to resent the person you have to spend your life with. So that is a line from the book. So I just feel like the way it's depicted in the show, it's like there was never any love there. Like, I can't imagine there ever being any sort of love there at all. And in the beginning, like, he's kind of silly. Like, he pokes fun at her and he likes to make fun of her. So I don't know. Maybe it's not like that the whole thing. I think when you get 6 episodes of Mrs. Bennet, you start to dislike her so much that you can't imagine anybody else ever liking her so much.
Yeah. She's such an extreme version,
But I did like that version of Lydia, though.
Yes.
I think she plays her role. And Kitty too plays it. I mean, not to say that they don't all act out the parts well. They do. They acted it out as it was written for them. But I think that Mary and Kitty Lydia and Kitty are versions of them that I can get behind.
Mm-hmm. Although, but I don't like the way Wickham, like, he has no shame at all.
Mm-mm.
And that's not how I thought of him. I mean, at least I mean, he's still so upbeat as opposed to taking something seriously. Even when he's talking to Elizabeth in the garden and she tells, basically, without saying it,
I know.
tells him that she knows all about him. That's his only moment of pause.
Mm-hmm.
But, when the fact that he's there with this ill-gotten wife, he just plays along. It's all cheery.
And
so
that's pretty true to the book, though, of how Jane Austen writes Wickham, with no shame, he was a complete derelict. There's nothing redeeming or good about his character.
Well, and also, I mean, even if he is that way, to still act like he loves his wife, who he's just taken advantage of. That's the part that I mean, mostly, this is going to be a marriage like from others where
worse.
Yeah. I mean, I won't be tolerating, anyway.
And you see that when they're in London and she keeps asking him to go out and he's just like irritated with her and everything she does. There's that scene where she's like, I can't believe who's outside. And he gets mad and he snaps, just tell me who's outside. But then you also see at the end when they're doing the montage through the wedding, she's on the bed looking at him smiling and he's just kind of like rolling his eyes and looking away from her. So it's everything that Wickham, and I did appreciate that they wrote it that way, is everything Wickham does is for someone else's viewmanship so that he can play some sort of game or get some sort of advantage. And so I think they did that part justice to his character for sure. Yeah. But it was disgusting to watch him talk with Elizabeth in the garden, knowing what happened.
Right. Yeah.
Even when they're walking and she keeps talking about, oh, isn't my husband an expert horseman? And then she says to her sisters, I should have brought all my sisters to Brighton and I could have gotten you all husbands. And Elizabeth Bennet says, thank you for my favor, but I don't really like your way of getting husbands.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, and the scene where I thought was very effective, but the scene when Georgiana's playing the piano.
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth is with her and Darcy is sitting there, and Bingley's sister, one of Bingley's sisters, is just downright mean and about Lydia, but she's speaking of Wickham, I should say. And of course, you see the look on Georgiana's face. I really like that actress that played Georgiana.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just see the pain. And it's one of the reasons I think, the look exchange between Darcy and Elizabeth is really good. And part of it's because she interrupts that conversation and gets up and is helping Georgiana and trying to get off that subject, and she could easily have reacted in a different way. And so, and then, it's that those sisters of Bingley's, especially the single sister,
Caroline.
Yeah. Now, and that was, I think they cut her out in the 2005 version.
Nope. They cut out her other sister. The married one.
The married sister. Yeah, I knew that. They kept Caroline, but it was
Louisa.
Yeah.
I don't even remember her husband's name, but that's a pretty good depiction of how they were written in the book. Mr. Hurst and her. And I liked this version of Caroline. I think that, again, very true to the books, but she has that moment where you can see she's not wholly bad. She's only bad when she sees a threat to her relationship with Darcy. And that's why she really hates Elizabeth Bennet, and all the Bennets, because she sees Jane as, well, Darcy won't want to marry me if we're engaged to this family, and he won't want to be with me if he likes Elizabeth. So everything that she feels towards them is solely based on her relationship with Darcy. Because when it comes to Wickham, she does give Elizabeth that friendly warning, and that is from the books as well. So you can see that Caroline is not wholly bad, though she's still very awful.
Yeah.
She has these moments you're like, okay, I can see why Charles keeps her around.
I mean, she undoubtedly knew what happened. Well, maybe she didn't know what happened to Georgiana.
No, she didn't, because Darcy, that was a shameful thing. Darcy never said it to anybody.
That's why he talks about it's his pride that kept him from sharing that, what he had to deal with people. And yeah.
And I know that's how that was written by Jane Austen, but that's even a disservice because it's not his pride. It was his wanting to protect Georgiana from a loss of reputation.
Right.
That kept him from doing it. I mean, yeah, I'm sure his pride was in there, but more than anything, it was his sister that would be damaged, not Darcy.
Right. Yeah. But he's a very private person and didn't want to share, what had happened or what. So it's like it reminds me of somebody who won't, they get raped and they don't stand up about it and go after their accuser or report it. And then, so that person's free to do the same thing to other people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, I understand how awful it is. But that's one of the consequences is they're around to victimize other people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think both sides of those are true, because I think you could see this in Georgiana too, that it was almost like she, you have those sexual assaults where people are like, well, it's my fault because I did this. So right. I had to take the blame for this happening to me. And I think that's kind of how Georgiana was with it too. Like Darcy had he should have mentioned, he didn't have to say his sister, but he should have said something to somebody of, do not let him in your town. This is the kind of man he is.
Right.
But I think Georgiana also kind of felt like, well, I did this. This is my fault just as much as it is his fault. And so I'm just as much to blame. But I mean, naive 15-year-old girl who was sheltered her entire life versus a worldly guy who had no scruples about anything.
And had a relationship with her family.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I do like, there's one thing that, no, that sounds bad. There's not one thing, but another thing that I liked is when Darcy is writing the letter, he's saying the story of Wickham, and they're showing it. I like that in that hallway, we see George connect with Georgiana, because I think that says something that's not said in the books, but is what we're expected to believe. And this showed it, where I think Wickham probably knew at some point, I'm going to run out of this money and I'm going to need to come crawling back to the Darcys in some way, shape, or form. So he's always so conniving to keep his options open. So when he sees Georgiana and he gives her that smile and that kiss on the hand, he's reminding her, hey, remember me? I'm your good pal. And so he could get in there. And that scene, I don't think is written in the books, but I think it was necessary to be seen on the screen. And I think that was a really smart thing to put that in there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, that how many characters in Jane Austen's books have the same names.
I know.
She liked those names.
She did a lot.
Charlotte, Georgiana, Elizabeth. I'm sure there were other Elizabeths.
Jane was in a couple of them too.
Jane, yeah. I'm sure they were her friends and relatives, but the names that
she never used Cassandra.
Yeah.
And that was her favorite sister. So I don't know.
Well,
I know. I like the version that we get of Colonel Fitzwilliam too. This is the version of Colonel Fitzwilliam that I expect to see on screen, because he's jovial, he's personable, he's interested, he smiles a lot, he laughs a lot, he engages Elizabeth, and that's the kind of Colonel Fitzwilliam that I read. So right. I like seeing that Colonel Fitzwilliam on the screen.
Right. Yeah. There were some wonderful acting jobs in this.
Absolutely. I think they all did a great job.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I can't abide Mrs. Bennet, but maybe it was a good job of portraying her, but it was over the top, if you ask me. And it was pretty much the same volume, whether she was happy or sad.
Yep.
She was hysterical, whether she was happy or sad about it. And how quickly she turned on, from being upset about her daughter to being, we have to have the wedding here. And, that I'm sure that was depicting some people who were really that way, but it was over the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was nothing subtle about that characterization.
No. And I think they were trying to get her really to depict why Darcy was so put off by her on screen is what I have to imagine they were doing, but they could have done that in a different way, because you don't want Mrs. Bennet to be wholly unlikable, because Elizabeth, part of the reason she gets upset when Darcy says these things about her mother, her father, her 3 younger sisters, is because she loves her family.
Right.
Yeah, she gets irritated with them, but she loves them. This Mrs. Bennet, it's hard to love her. And I imagine that Elizabeth would have no problem cutting her off just because of how she is and how Elizabeth is. But I was just going to compare it. And
it's pretty hard to.
I think if we were given a Mrs. Bennet that was equal parts silly and loving, equal parts irrational and sometimes lucid, I think it would be a better match to who Jane Austen writes about or who Jane Austen had in her head.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I really disliked more than ever before the Lady Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when she goes to visit Elizabeth, that woman, and also the way she acts towards everybody in her circle in her house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like everybody has to agree with every little thing she says. Yep. There's no dissent, everybody has to do everything she wants.
Yeah.
So it does really throw her off when Elizabeth won't go along with this.
Even when Elizabeth wouldn't take the carriage that she was offering.
Yeah.
And she even said, I'm really put out by her not taking your carriage. You're put out. Yeah. Because I don't think that makes any logical sense.
Yeah, well, obviously she's not a logical person.
No. And even when she does appear at the Bennet's house, the way she speaks to Mrs. Bennet, she doesn't know Mrs. Bennet. It's astounding to me how rude she is to her. In the books, I think it's a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not kind. It's not, none of it's kind, but I feel like it's more like what would be an expected interaction would be with someone you don't know. I feel like I could be wrong. It's been about a year since I read it, maybe 2 years, but I feel like there should have been more pretense of this is how society acts. So I'm going to act how society acts. I'm still going to be rude, but I'm going to give due deference where I have to give due deference. And she doesn't do that.
You can see the parallels between her and Lady Denham.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Especially Lady Denham in the first 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. She does soften some in the 3rd season, but
I think Lady Denham's more likable than this Lady Catherine.
Oh yeah. She's more I'm going to put on blustery, but I'm not always that way.
Yeah. You know? Underneath I'm a softie.
Yeah. And the scene where Wickham and Lydia are in the bedroom, in the hotel room or the whatever, the inn, in the room in the inn. It really did remind me of the way that Augusta and Edward were in the room. I mean, he was sitting up writing and she was laying in the bed.
I flashed right back to that scene.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we talked about that when we were doing the recap of that episode.
I don't know that I don't really remember.
I did, I think.
You might have said that it was, I just didn't think of it at the time, but it's obvious to me now, seeing the way they depicted it here.
Yeah.
So it's, I'm sure you can see even more when you watch this. And I'm going to have to go back and watch his version, Davy's version of Sense and Sensibility. So I bet there's some inspiration from it. And also, I don't know if he did Emma. I don't know.
That was another one that came out in 1995, I think. The Gwyneth Paltrow version.
I
didn't see Emma on his IMDb credits.
Okay, so he may have never done it.
Which is, but, I mean, make the round. If you're going to make the rounds, Andrew Davies, make the rounds.
Well, he's got to have somebody pay for it, right?
That's true.
He wrote Mr. Suffrage. I didn't
remember
that. You've seen that? It's the series was on PBS.
I've seen it. It's in my queue on my.
It's good,
but I haven't seen it yet.
It's good. I didn't realize that he wrote it. I have seen Little Doric, and yeah, it was. Well, I have more challenge.
A lot.
at least the miniseries for Sense and Sensibility was only 3 episodes,
Mm-hmm.
so it didn't get
Well,
stretched
that's what
out.
he wrote. It might not be 3 episodes, but he wrote 3
Oh,
of the
that
episodes.
might be true.
He did do Emma, the TV movie Emma, 1996.
Oh, really? And all in the same time period, basically.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, 95 was Pride and Prejudice, Emma 96, and then Sense and Sensibility 2008.
right. But I mean, that's pretty
Yeah.
close together. You know,
And he
there is,
did Bridget Jones's Diary, which was essentially Pride and Prejudice in 2001. So
yeah, it is. I mean, it's very similar. I haven't seen this version of Emma. I'm gonna have to watch it.
the 2008, oh, there are only 3 episodes. That Sense and Sensibility is on BritBox, you said, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Because I think that's where I saw it. Because I saw it somewhere. It had to be on BritBox.
I don't know. I know for sure that they have this. No, I don't know if they have the 2008, but I would suspect they would.
Yeah,
they
I
have
think
the
so.
earlier version. Boy, I think the most, even though it's the same story, all the different interpretations of Emma, the way they're, the movies,
Yeah,
the way they're interpreted are, it's amazing, the different ones.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I like even the modern takes on it. There's one of my favorites modern takes of Pride and Prejudice is called Bride in Prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
I love Bollywood makes me happy. I don't even have a reason for it, but Bollywood makes me happy. And so that it's a Bollywood thing is like, ah.
Yeah.
I love it. But
Wow.
Clueless is one of my favorite versions of Emma. So
sure. Yeah. In this version of Emma that he did, Kate Beckinsale is the lead for Emma, and Mark Strong is Mr. Knightley, and they're both really have so many big films now.
Yeah. So I've been saying I have a hot take on this Darcy. I do not like the pond scene. I hate the pond scene. I hate it. I think it's dumb.
It's unnecessary.
Yes.
It's like Davies just wanted to do something radical, I guess.
And that's kind of his MO.
Well, we get that in Sanditon too.
Yep. Yeah, we don't have that same sort of nudity or scene in any other ones that he wasn't a part of writing, just the ones that he did write.
Yeah, I didn't like that one either.
No. It just like I think I kind of like how she's surprised to come upon him, but he didn't need to be dripping wet for that to happen. It could have just been, and I get that they kind of, I did like sort of how he had to rush to get dressed and come out to see her properly.
Right.
I did like that, but I feel like it could have been done a different way. I just thought the pond scene was really unnecessary. And I know that the people who love the 1995 version, they love that scene. Like they love that scene. If this is their Mr. Darcy, they love it. And I thought it was pointless.
It didn't do anything for me.
No, I don't need to see that. I need to see passion, and I need to see the words, and I need to see I don't know. I didn't need it, and I didn't like it. And every time it comes on, I feel like cringy. I don't want to watch this.
It is interesting, some of the situations where they put some of this dialogue, you know what I mean? So the fact that she meets Georgiana in the hotel, in the inn,
that's in the book that way.
Is it? That's how they depicted it. I didn't remember that, but it's other depictions, other versions of this having them meeting a different way, in a different setting,
Yeah.
So yeah.
The reason that happened because Darcy wanted to get her away from the party. He wanted to get her away from Caroline Bingley to just meet Elizabeth. But I feel like Charles Bingley came along with him. I thought he was in the room the whole time with him from the book. But again, it's been a couple of years since I read the book, and my short-term memory, not so good. So I could be wrong there, but I'm fairly certain that's the way it was in the book. And I love this Charles Bingley. Like I love him. I don't think there's been a Charles Bingley on screen that I haven't liked.
Yeah, no, he's a very likable character, and they've cast him as a likable character, as Jane says, he's just what a young man should be.
Yes. And that scene when he comes to when he comes to Longbourn in episode 5 or 6, I think it's 6. And he says, they ask how long he's going to stay. And he's like, we hope for a few weeks. very much hope for a few weeks. Very much hope for a few weeks. Like, I don't, might not say it 3 times, but the way he's like excitedly looking at Jane, like almost manically excitedly looking at Jane, it makes me laugh every time I see it. And that is Charles Bingley, like to a T. That is Charles Bingley. That's why they suit.
He is a very likable character.
Mhm.
You know, it is that.
Yes.
So,
and I do think that I again, I don't have a lot of knowledge on this other than the shows I've seen or books I've read, but I feel like this was more realistic in terms of stylizing, in terms of how the Bennets live, because I always kind of picture them as not flat broke, but they aren't wealthy. They have enough to keep servants. They have enough to keep ladies' maids. They have enough to not have to work their land. They have tenants, so they may not be making a whole lot. So I felt like I did like how this house was kept a little more. I liked the flow of this house. I liked how the girls.
Yes, it wasn't such a farm.
Yeah, exactly. And I like how I was noticing in episode 6, and I'm sure I noticed it beforehand, but I watched episode 6 today. When the girls went out, they all had gloves on and bonnets and their little, what are those little tiny jackets called?
Oh, I don't know, but
I know what they're called. But that was, from my understanding, that was the right way to go out with the opposite sex when you're out and about in town or going on a walk, whatever. That was the right way to attire yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, it was the different ways it's been depicted, but it's like that even in theater, you know, you go to the theater and I saw a version of Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors that was very different than most the way they put it on. I mean, in it, all the characters, each character, it was a stereotype of that character. So they were dressed like the twin servants are dressed as sort of clowns. And the mayor of the town was like a Nazi mayor, you know, official. Anyway, it was very well done. I'm not describing it very well because it was very well done.
All I'm picturing are clowns and Nazis right now.
Well, I was just giving you the most extreme, you know, versions of it. So it was interesting to see the play that done that way. That's one thing you see in theater even more. You see it in film. Yeah. But this was
artistic license.
Right. This was obviously an attempt to make it as close to the book, or at least this reading of the book, as possible.
Yeah.
I do not like the music, especially the intro music, the theme music. I mean, I'm always fast forwarding through that, so I don't have to listen to it.
I like it the first time it comes on. Like when I turn on episode 1, the music's there. I'm like, oh, I'm happy this is on again. And then it plays at the end of that episode. And then immediately in, like, no. But I can skip the intro on Prime. I can't. Oftentimes, to go to the next episode doesn't come up right away. So I have to sit there and listen through that music, because if I fast forward all, it's not going to give me the opportunity to skip to the next episode.
Right.
So it's, right. I think maybe we would like it more if we just heard it in the beginning and at the end, total, not beginning and end of every episode, but it was just the same piece over and over and over and over again.
I don't remember that in other series, how much I disliked the music. The music in the dances was fine, you know. I didn't mind that at all, but that intro music, ugh.
I do like how much of their life was put on in the 1995 version, because you did see them at several different dances. You did see them going to their aunt's house for cards. You did see them walking around in town. You saw all these aspects of their life. It wasn't just looped to Elizabeth and Darcy, which obviously is most people's favorite part, but I like seeing the rest of it because the rest of it makes them who they are.
Sure. Yeah.
And this Mr. Collins, he is not as likable as other Collins.
He's a little over the top.
Yes. He's sniveling is how I would describe him.
I love the way Elizabeth dispatches him when he comes to gloat about what happened to Lydia. he says he's there to condole them, but that's not why he's there. And she
No.
calls him basically, oh, well, then you aren't going to want to be associated with us. That's not how she puts it, but that's the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And his, like, I also like his house. I like that he's like, and these shelves I put up myself. Like, whoa, shelves, huh? Good job.
Yeah, I do like Charlotte.
I love this Charlotte.
Uh,
And I think a lot of the other versions kind of miss this, but I think it's necessary for Charlotte, as it happened in the books, to point out to Elizabeth how much Darcy looks at her, to point out to Elizabeth that he's paying her more attention than he pays anybody else. Because without that, the story doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And this Charlotte does that at every opportunity.
And also why she accepts Colin's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I agree. And I felt like that was inviting her over to the house after it was I like that they kept that in there as it was in the books. And Sir William Lucas is a character who I really enjoy. I mean, he's silly, he's goofy, but I like him, and he's such a genuine, sweet man. And that scene where Elizabeth Bennet comes over, or she's just walking past, and he's like, Elizabeth, come and dance with Mr. Darcy. She says, please don't think that I came this way to beg for a dance partner. But the way he just kept going on, and he interrupted the dance to talk to them about the engagement that was soon to be happening between Charles and Jane. It's just, he doesn't have any self-awareness, but he so badly wants to help everyone around him.
Right.
He even offers to take Caroline and Louisa to St. James's Court when he's there now.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting how that happens, how they depict that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They made you like him.
Anything else that you really, really liked or really disliked? Or
I mean, there's not a lot that I can say that I don't think I actively disliked anything other than the sound of Mrs. Bennet's voice. But
yeah, I'm with you there.
But I think that they're just, and the pond scene, those are the only things that I thought were like,
yeah.
I think what about you? I think that's it for me.
Well, yeah, Mrs. Bennet was just over the top for me. I just thought the pond scene was completely unnecessary.
Yes.
There's characters that I liked and disliked more than others, but other than the music, the intro music, I really disliked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can agree.
It wasn't just that I kept hearing it; it was that I could have done with just something totally different.
Yes, agreed. And if you're gonna do, well, I suppose they probably release it like they do Sanditon. Sanditon has the same intro, but I guess for us, it's like we're listening to it back to back. Couldn't you change the music? But I guess that wasn't back to back when they put it out.
Right, which is understandable. I mean, I understand once they chose that music, why they stayed with it. I just don't like it.
Yeah, and I think they could shaken it up a little bit from beginning to end. Like, does it need the same to open and close out the series? I don't know. Of course, we do that for this podcast. We have the same music for the opening and end of the podcast, but
it's traditional. Yeah, but just there are many things I like about this version.
Mm-hmm.
I like when they do actually show emotion.
Yes.
And I like that it really gets into the details of the story. Yeah, but if anything, I think they could have done it in 4 episodes instead of 6. Possibly. That was kind of over the top.
Which is funny because we're all like, if they would have just given us more episodes than 6 of Sanditon, we could have flushed this out. But not everything needs more. And I think because, like, I've gotten to places when I write before where I'm like, oh, I don't know that I can cut any of this out. This just seems so. And I think that had to have been where they were with the screenplay is, well, we can't cut this out because Jane wrote this, Austen wrote this, and this has to be in there. They have to. So one of that's kind of where it was, is they just didn't feel like they could cut any of her pieces out of it. But they
didn't have to do as much editing as we know they had to do on Sanditon to get it, down to a more reasonable time. But because I mean, I was thinking about it when they overdo the carriage scenes, if you ask me, because that's one thing that Justin Young said was that he wanted more carriage scenes in Sanditon, but it was so expensive that they didn't. Yeah, I heard an interview about that. he wanted to have more settings that were in the carriages, but then it occurred to me that they were filming them from inside the carriages, where in the 95 version they didn't have cameras that small.
Yeah.
And so it's them getting in and out of carriages. You see carriages coming and going, which is even more reason that they didn't need to use as much footage for carriages as they did, if you ask me.
Yeah.
There are a lot of the scenery, and I just think a little bit goes a long way. I think they could have made it in fewer episodes.
Yeah. There were a lot of scenes of like Elizabeth, for instance, where she would be walking through the countryside and no one's with her. All you're doing is watching her walk. Like, we don't need as much of that to know that she enjoys walking. Yeah. There's also maybe it was more towards like the middle of this, and maybe it's because it was being produced weekly, but they would almost do like a sort of recap after the proposal. You kept hearing Elizabeth's refusal and what he said on both of them. Like, we don't need that. Could you do a recap in the beginning? We don't need this to be, because that was like a 20 minutes into the episode. It was that just rehashing what had already happened.
And it probably is because it was on television. It was a week at a time, and some people may have come in and missed an episode. It wasn't like now where we can stream it, and see the whole thing. I mean, it was very different then. If you missed an episode, you're like, what happened?
Yeah. And so I get why they didn't use a recap. I feel like it just takes, now that I can access it whenever I want, it just feels like it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of time.
Yep.
But I think if you love the book, I don't think you can dislike this version. I don't think it's possible. And part of me almost felt, when I was saying that this wasn't my favorite version, part of me almost felt like I was betraying Jane Austen a little bit, because I love the book so much. And this one is so much the book that I was like, well, am I saying I don't like no, but I can read. And when I'm reading the book, it's in my head, the emotions are expressed and it's poured up because I'm reading it in my voice. So when it comes on screen, I don't want to read it I don't want it to be like I'm reading the screen. I want to actually see it play out. And so,
right. And there's a big difference in the medium of a book or a film. There's little shortcuts you have to take, or differences to tell what the person's thinking. Or,
you have to show it instead of say it.
Yeah.
And I think they did a lot of solitary things that didn't need to be in there. So other than that, I don't think I have any complaints about it. I do enjoy watching it. It takes a lot. It takes 6 hours to watch, but I do enjoy it. I won't do this one as often as I do the other Pride and Prejudice, but once every couple of years, I'll watch this one. I'll just get a hankering for it. And I do think that all the actors did play their parts.
I just want to not forget to tell you something.
Yeah, what?
Did you notice the whippets in it?
No, but there was one scene where there were dogs. I was like, oh, Janice is going to bring up the dogs. I need to ask what kind those were. Were they whippets?
Those were whippets. Yeah, they were whippets. They were in a couple of scenes. They were
Darcy's dogs, right?
Yeah, they were Darcy's dogs, which makes, so I should like this version. I do like those episodes really a lot. Yeah, it was awesome. There were probably 3 different scenes that the dogs were in, and I wouldn't be surprised if I knew who the dogs were, that I would know who the breeders were. But
really?
The dogs are, well, yeah, because there's so much from I've been in whippets since 1986.
Okay.
And this was 95, so somebody's dogs in England were used. They were, it was fun. There's they're in the background, you know what I mean?
But I noticed them, so I knew that you were going to notice them.
Yeah, and they were running around, and I remember when I was watching that part again last night, I thought, I gotta remember to say something about the whippets. At first I was like, are these greyhounds or whippets? But they're whippets. I didn't
know what kind they were, but I knew that you were going to know what kind of dog they were.
Yep.
Because I've seen yours here and there, but I haven't seen yours a lot, so I can't really pick it up when I see them. I think I thought they were greyhounds.
Yeah, and they were too small to be to be greyhounds.
So is there anything else that you want to say about this version?
No, I think we've pretty well covered it. I mean, without going through scene by scene.
Which 8 hours of a podcast, anyone? And this was just a review, not a recap, because we're assuming all of you have seen it by now. If you have not, go watch it. It's on Hulu, it's on Peacock, it's on Amazon Prime, you can rent it, buy it. I have it. I bought it a few years ago, so I have it on Prime. That's how I watch it. No commercials that way. Perfect.
Yeah.
So that is available for you. Next week, we are bringing you, now we tried very hard, and I think we were successful. Very hard not to compare the two versions in this episode. So next week, the reason why is because next week you're getting the comparison. Because I do think that we need to highlight them side by side to really understand why. Because this is a debate. If you don't realize that between these two versions is a debate in the Jane Austen community, you're living under a rock, because this is a hot debate in this community. Okay, so on the 19th, we are bringing you our verses. Okay, and then on the 26th, you are going to get our review of some holiday fan fiction from Sanditon. Now, you guys haven't sent us in yet anything for this. So I think Janice and I are just going to pick up some holiday ones that we can see for Sanditon, a fan fiction, and we're just going to agree on ones we want to review, and we're just going to review them. We'll take probably 2 or 3 because usually the holiday ones are short, and that'll be the last one that you get from us until January. Okay. So we've got just 3 more for this season, and then we'll be coming back after a month break to chat with you all again. And then we'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.